On this week's episode of the Peach Life podcast, we are joined by Graeme from Woodness Goodness. Join our conversation as we talk about his cabin build and the new projects he is working on. This is an episode that I'm really excited about. It was when I started watching his channel that we decided to build the studio. So following along on his journey was a huge source of inspiration and hope along the way. Join us every Saturday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for new episodes from the Peach Life podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. Dude, thank you so much for joining me today, man. I appreciate it.
No, man, it's awesome. So what is it? You have a podcast and do you make tiny houses too?
Me and my wife, we've been doing tiny living. We've lived in a converted trailer for like a RV for almost 3 years now. And we had decided, it like sparked, the biggest reason was from starting to watch your channel, and you were doing this, you were maybe only 10, 15 videos in. And I'm like, man, we seem like we were pretty much the same situation. And I was like, you know what? I think we can do that. And we were already thinking of doing something for my wife, like getting an art studio where she could paint like uptown. And I was like, well, for what we're going to pay in a year of rent, we can way cheaper build this here, have it closer to home. And so that was it. It was like the middle of June that we decided, okay, let's do it. And we sparked it, right then, and just kind of been following along with your channel as well. And as I've been doing it, so it even gave me hope along the way. Times that are tough and rough. I know how it is. There's days where it's good and days where it's just terrible.
Oh man, yeah, especially this year, right?
Oh, I know. But I've been thankful for one thing. For me, this is probably the only way I would have ever been able to even do something like this, to like, at this time, to get like a little time off of work where I was actually stuck at home at like any other time in my life so far. Like, so that was almost a blessing in disguise that really kind of put us into overdrive to just say, hey, let's just do this. We recorded it. We'll put some episodes out at some point along the line of the build. It was quite a journey. And so, but yeah, I love your channel. I love what you're doing. So, I really want to, had so many questions that, I had to come up along the way, even as I'm building. And I'm like, I love that you're giving that kind of advice out there for other people, and that you're, just doing something that's really awesome.
I appreciate it, man. I'm trying. I'm having fun, but I, even with everything I've learned, any decision you make, you second guess yourself. There's always there's a fellow up in New York. I think he's based in New York City. He runs a online publication called Field Mag.
Okay.
Have you heard of it? I don't know. I had not heard of it beforehand, but
Mm-mm.
he's got a decent little following, and I'm doing a little thing with him, and he asked me all these questions, and he asked me, 5 do's and 5 don'ts, and one thing I thought of is like, don't listen to everybody, or but do listen to everybody with a grain of salt, because there's like thousands of ways of doing something. You could use nails, you could use glue, you could use screws, you could use a staple gun, you could use OSB, you could use plywood, there's like a million ways to build something.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And then those prices definitely add up in different ways too. Some choices we made, we were like, well, we could have went way cheaper, or something. It was a give and take. Like, I mean, I'm sure for you, the cedar siding was more time for sure, but it's like there's other ones that would have been a lot more expensive. So there's just a give and take for both sides of that.
Yeah. I mean, it looks really nice, but
I
when I
love it. I
look,
know that's the thing. I love how it looks, but yeah, when I see how many episodes, it's like, and another one of this, I'm like,
oh my
dude, that
gosh.
it was a, it was a,
And I mean, and not many people know this, but there's probably like 2 or 3 spots where I'm like, man, I could probably put a little more cedar at the very top.
oh yeah,
But then you start to go crazy because it feels like you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again.
yeah. It was hard even here, just deciding like, okay, when are we done? Like, when can we not do one more thing, and not try to be a perfectionist about it. So it's been a fun journey, and it really is like, it's in so many ways all thanks to you, man. You really was like, just was like, okay, he's doing it right now. Let's do this. Let's try it. Like, and so, I mean, I'm just really thankful. It was like, right, I've seen other stuff, but it was like right place at the right time with your channel, like that. It was just perfect. So thank
Dude, I
you, man.
appreciate it. It makes me feel good.
For you, if you want to tell everyone, like, what really sparked it, for you, to decide, like, like, hey, let's go for this. I mean, it's a big jump.
Yeah, I don't really know the actual moment where I was pushed over the edge to making that decision. Like, I'm gonna start breaking ground on my property. I think one thing that was rattled around in my head for a long time is just like, why not? Like, what's stopping me? I've thought about it. I grew up having a cabin in I grew up in northern British Columbia, so north
Oh,
of
wow.
you, and north of the border. And I actually grew up having a lake or a cabin. It was no power. We had an outhouse A-frame on a little lake in northern British Columbia. And I just remember, how relaxing it was. I remember just going for a fish, going for a little boat, all these things on the water, and life, and the pace of life when we were there was just like, I just remember it being really healthy for our family, and thoroughly enjoying myself, getting to know my dad in a different way, my mom in a different way, my sister in a different way. Just the lack of distraction, and the I don't know, the hype and the pace of life, typically when you're in a city, or you're keeping your job up, you're a
Yeah.
family man, or whatever it is, whether you're in school, the pace of life, it's not really sustainable. I mean, I think ultimately people make it work, but I don't necessarily uh think it's good for you. So I think thinking back to that, and then thinking back to my college days, where I had some friends with some lake houses north of Toronto, and the times we spent, again, like being college age, was just like the connection you'd have with your friends, like just around the fire or reading a book, or it was just different. It just was different. And throughout my entire life, going to these little getaways, whether it was a cabin or a lake house or a cottage in the mountains, I just always remember those times as being so good and so fun and so rich. And I think part of that played into me really wanting to create something on my property. And I don't live on a massive property. I have 3 acres. My home is at kind of the front of the 3 acres, and the cabin is kind of at the back and faces, basically a plantation of pines and old growth oak, that won't ever come down, because it's part of I guess a revitalization of a part of a little creek bed. And so basically my cabin faces that. And when I planned it, or started being like, walking my property, like, this would be a great spot for it. That was kind of in the back of my mind. This could be a moving picture,
Yeah.
I just windows facing the trees. And yeah, I mean, that's a long-winded answer to try and answer why I started. It's hard to, I don't quite remember why I did it, but I think the main theme was like, why not, and everything I could think of that would ultimately come out of building something like this was only good. I could only think of good things. And I wasn't dropping $10,000 in a single day. I
Yeah.
knew it was going to be a slow process, and I had weekends and all that other stuff to work with. So, and I had a daughter on the way, or I mean, we were trying to, at the time, and I think Reese came in like December of last year, my daughter. And I think I broke ground about a few months before that. And having an extra space, which eventually hopefully will be my office if I ever move into it. But you know I think that was kind of another reason in the back of my mind.
Well, did you have any construction experience, or how confident were you going into this that I could do this? Because for me, I had nothing of any measure. Like, I had never built anything that had walls, or anything that wasn't a small project or a little this or that. So for me, I was I was I remember times, and I still look because it's still so new, only a couple months, where I look up and around and I'm like, I still don't know how I did this or can't believe it. Just it feels like it wasn't me. Like I still don't know how I completed it and that it turned out nice. So for you though, like, did you have much experience before, or were you going in blind too?
Um, you know, I've always enjoyed work with my hands, and I've slowly collected tools. Like I didn't have to buy too many tools to build the cabin. I think I bought a medium crown or wide crown staple gun, which is essentially for the cedar shake so you don't split them. I had to buy that, and then I bought an auger to dig my piling holes because I tried digging it with a shovel and I was like, I can't do this. So um, I guess I've slowly collected tools as I've done little DIY projects and learned a thing or two around the house. I've owned another house in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and I did a bunch of work to that. But prior to that, to pay for film school, I actually did frame homes. I framed homes for about a year, give or take, and I definitely learned a lot, but it's a different kind of learning when, your boss just kind of points to a bunch of studs on the ground. He's like, all right, build this, 16-foot wall for me. And so I just lay the studs, all I would do is crown the studs, lay them down, and then I would use a hammer and nails and just beat on this little wall until it was built. And then I was making, small cuts for the actual framers, and carrying OSB and sheathing and stuff like that to them. But kind of being around it, and you're working 10-12 hour days, you start to pick up quite a bit. But it's certainly, if someone was to give me like a blueprint, like, hey, can you build this, I would have no idea. you know and obviously YouTube, obviously, I love YouTube. I think YouTube is incredible because the 10, 20, 30 minute shows, whatever you're watching, and 9 times out of 10 you're going to learn something from it. It's always kind of an educational aspect with YouTube, I find. Whether it's cooking, I love binging with Babish, or whatever. And it seems that you always come out of it learning something, whether it was the person who is presenting or fixing something or whatever, and you realize they've came from a similar background as you, or what they do with their spare time, or the encouragement you receive from it. You're always it's not just pure entertainment. I always
Oh
feel
yeah.
like it's a different, I don't know, it just gives a lot. So I definitely learned a lot just kind of looking through YouTube and seeing what people did before me.
Yeah, I like that you have that opinion because that I mean, I even try to teach my daughter that where that's her view. She's 7 and her opinion of YouTube is like this place that you learn. And I always say like I feel personally, I mean, probably not in reality, that I've gotten, the multiple PhDs from YouTube. I mean, from listening to just incredible podcasts and all kinds of, I mean, genius level. There's so much you can gain that, everything from like relaxing videos that bust live people or yours or there's so much you can gain from it in so many different areas that it is kind of the coolest learning tool I think that we really have out there right now.
Oh, absolutely. And the stats are staggering. Like I think it's 50% of all internet consumption is done on YouTube.
Doesn't
And
surprise
and yet there's so many people that have no idea. Like I mean, I have family members and close friends. I mean, just because I have a YouTube channel that some might think is successful doesn't mean that it's their niche. It doesn't mean it's they're interested in it, other than the fact that they know me in it. It doesn't really um, call to them in any way, shape, or form. But it's incredible how much stuff you can find, and you know it could be just you just run into something you'd never even heard of, and it's someone with like 2 million subscribers, and it's content you really vibe with,
you.
and that's on YouTube. It's crazy.
I mean, I even found that because my mom ended up really getting into channels like van life and bus life stuff and like that. And I found that even me and my mom ended up bonding even more, even as an adult, over these channels that we both like didn't know that we both watch and then find out. And then, you start talking. So there's really cool stuff that happens, with that.
Oh, dude, it's awesome. Yeah, I'm a huge fan. I'm a I'm a big fan. I actually find it harder to sit down and watch a Netflix or an Amazon Prime show or a movie or something now, because there's a different kind of appreciation for minutes spent in front of a screen now for me. Because I do video production for my job, so you know the more I can spend away from a screen, the better. And so if I'm gonna consume content, I want a little more bang for my buck, I guess.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. If you did it again, if you had to start over from scratch and build the cabin or build anything like that, what would you do different? What would you size or shape or anything?
Yeah, I don't know. The main thing that is like a common theme, especially if you've followed along and you've seen I've made some mistakes here and there, um, it'd probably be planning. I did just kind of, I mean, the whole attitude I had, from the get go was like, why not? Why not just start? And great attitude to have for sure. But, you know, there were some things that would have been nice to maybe think of a little bit more prior to doing. So, whether it was, making sure my pilings were completely square with one another, or figuring out a way to find a good bracket, a good steel bracket that I could, sink into the concrete when the concrete was wet. That so, when the concrete was dry, I wouldn't have to be drilling brackets into the concrete, and just stuff like that. I think, that would have been a pretty big help, and I would have avoided a lot of headaches. Um, but I as it's funny. So many people ask me, "Hey, do you have blueprints? I'd love to buy this design." I'm like, I don't know if you want to buy this design. It looks really good. I get it, but I've not gone to you know, the quarter inch and the 16th of an inch measurements on this thing.
Yeah, that's
Things,
I couldn't give anybody a real accurate, I can give you an estimate, but it's all just done one piece at a time there.
yeah, like I know the interior it's roughly 240 square feet, but I mean, I haven't subtracted my, 1 inch pine, my tongue and groove pine siding on the interior. I have not uh, added the OSB and the 3 layers of cedar shakes and, all the other stuff on the outside to know what my outside dimensions are. I haven't even gotten a tape measure and measured that yet. But ultimately I had a drawing. I drew up a little, picture in one of my notebooks, and I went off that. I had an idea that 12 by 20 feet seems like a nice size, kind of a long rectangle. I wanted the shed style roof because I knew it would be slightly easier for me to come up with the schematics and the mathematics to
Yeah,
make that
me as
angle
well.
work. And other than that, I just kind of went for it. And yeah, I mean, again, the biggest things were just not really having a concrete drawing or a concrete blueprint where I could kind of go back to and be like, okay, well, this cut's going to work here, or this thickness of sheathing won't work, or else I'm going to have to scrap on a very small piece of steel roof at the very end, which isn't going to be fun. Like I didn't even think of the widths of the metal sheets of steel roof. So I ended up having to cut about 6 inches off one, which again, not a big deal. It was right on a seam. However, if I'd planned prior to that a little bit more, I would have made my roof 6 inches wider. So I wouldn't even have to cut a piece of steel.
Yeah, I think I ended up having to add a piece at that very end that ended up being just kind of the weird little spot. I was thinking about one thing as you were talking about the cement and the pilings, was that that might have been actually one of the scarier parts, maybe for anybody, is that commitment, and it always seems risky and tricky. I think, I mean, that we had a cement slab that was already, we were able to build right on, and I think that might have been the part for me that almost would have made me not do it, was having to actually build the pylons and then build on top of that. So I think that might be, for a lot of people, might be one of the scarier parts of the project.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, the basics are there, but it is, there's a million and one analogies of foundations, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Foundations, there's a good reason, because the foundation is so important. And yeah, it can be kind of intimidating to do that. And it should be, because you want to take your foundation pretty seriously. But at the same time, it was such a great first step, because the moment I had the auger out there and I was digging holes, I could dig 3 holes and then leave that project for a year, right? But every hole I dug, I was closer, and I realized, okay, well, I only got a couple more. Let's just keep going. And as soon as I had 9 holes dug, it was on to the next thing. I was like, okay, I got 9 holes. Like, next step is to buy concrete, some rebar, some sono tubes, and I found a used concrete mixer, because I knew I've mixed concrete by hand before, and I just didn't want to do it. And yeah, before you know it, you have your piling foundation set up, and a couple found pilings are maybe a 16th inch lower than the other, but to me, I'm like, that was so close to perfection for someone who had never done this before. I was ecstatic. I was so pumped. Couldn't I 16th of an inch, I don't care. Like, that's,
Yeah.
we'll make up for it later. But again, yeah, it was hard first step to take, but again, yeah, it was incredible after it was done. It just felt like you had the turbo boosters on, and you're like, I'm doing it now. The concrete's poured. It's like, let's go.
So as you were already, what, like, well, at least 6 or 7 months into building it, and then COVID starts happening, how did that affect in or play into the completion or the time frame? Did it help or hurt?
Yeah, I think one thing that helped with the transition from kind of what a lot of people were calling regular life, or what people felt like regular life was prior to COVID happening. Um, One thing that helped me transition into that was the fact that I had a daughter, right? I had a baby in December of 2019, or no, 2020. What we're in 2021. Yeah,
2020.
we're in 2021. So yeah,
Yeah, what?
2020.
Right?
Oh no, 2019.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because she was born right before January. I'm terrible with months. Okay, I'm terrible. And anyhow, that when you have a newborn, you're kind of her. She's so precious, and you're not sure. You don't want just anyone coming over, and the first 2 months, you're just getting used to having a third person in the house. And so being at home and being kind of a quieter, home-based lifestyle was already taking place, and then COVID happened, and our day to day within the home on the property didn't change all that much. Obviously, work started to fluctuate. Thank God I didn't like lose my job or anything, but certain clients were wanting to do videos for certain things. Other clients want to do more videos. Other clients want to do less. But ultimately, that kind of attitude that I had on my property was I had more time at home. Everyone was working from home. So I kind of went from, kind of managing my schedule from, 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. was computer time, editing, catching up on emails, all that stuff. And after that, it was, if the weather was okay, I'd try and do some cabin work. And so I, I'm I would think that with everything going on, it gave me more time to work on the cabin, and yeah, it probably was helpful in a lot of ways, honestly.
Yeah, that's always something I'm interested to see with people, because I've seen it, described or talked about so many ways. Uh One lady described it as the great slowdown. And I remember thinking that for me that felt really accurate, was that it really made me readjust, like, wait, what are we doing with life? Like, are we going for the things that we want to be going for? And kind of just, for me, expedited that process to see, how quickly things can change.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And a new perspective is very good to have, right? There's parts of it that totally hurt. There's parts of it that we're all going to adjust to, and find harder than others. I mean, I'm an extrovert. I love people. And that is one thing that this YouTube channel actually has given me. And I wouldn't have known that until maybe a few months ago. I started to realize, like, this is why I really enjoy it, is even though there's no one with me out there, it's just me working on the cabin, or now I'm working on this mobile trailer, but it still feels like I have someone with me. I have someone that I'm kind of talking to, maybe not presently. In the future, they're going to hear whatever it is I edit together and post on YouTube. But um, yeah, I mean, that that's one of the hardest things for me, enjoying people and enjoying going to a bar and watch the game or whatever. And you know it's a lot harder to do that now. But yeah, YouTube's definitely given me a bit of an outlet to still enjoy that part of life that I thoroughly invest and enjoy time doing.
Yeah, you just brought up the mobile trailer you're working on right now. I'm loving watching that. That is looking awesome. You want to talk a little bit about that? What your, total plans are for it when it's done? What's your vision?
Yeah, so I think I just, as the cabin build started to wrap up, again, having something like YouTube is kind of keeps you on your toes. It's a bit of a motivational energy that's just constant. If there's someone waiting for a video and you're like, oh man, I haven't posted a video in a couple weeks, it's a nice reminder, and it keeps you in check that, hey, just keep going, man, people are waiting for this. And other than a paycheck from your boss or your wife saying this project needs to get done, there aren't a lot of those things in our lives that keep us moving forward, on especially on projects like this, a project that a lot of people would consider a hobby or kind of an extracurricular activity. Those motivational moments, they can kind of disappear. So basically, cabin's coming to an end. I'm thinking I need something to work on. And so I start scouring the internet. I talked to a friend who owns a vineyard close by, and he's like, hey, you should build a mobile bar out of a horse trailer. I've seen them before. I'm like, really cool. So he sends me a bunch of photos and I get hooked. I'm like, this is
Okay,
dope.
that's how it is. That's how they get you.
Yeah, this is wild. So then I went out and I found one, bought it, didn't touch it for a long time.
Okay, so you had it sitting there for a bit.
Yeah, I probably had it for a few months because I
Okay.
knew I wanted to do it. And, with COVID, you just never know what is hard to find these days. It could be a patio set, it could be a washer, dryer, a freezer, and trailers. Trailers are very hard to find right now. Even used ones, even ones that are rusty and needed a lot of work, like my little horse trailer. So as soon as I found it, I knew I had to get it. In fact, I own two now. I bought another one a couple months ago because I just, I just figured, hey, if I'm going to build one, I'm going to enjoy it. Maybe I'll build two.
Okay.
So, but the idea is basically to kind of create a space for people to serve drinks out of, instead of renting a tent or setting up a tent for exterior services for a vineyard or a wedding or an event, especially with everything going on. I think stuff like this, or a little mobile bar, a mobile whatever you want to serve from it, is going to be kind of ideal. So I kind of want to see how it does, and kind of create my vision, and yeah, I don't know, see where it goes.
Yeah, it seems pretty cool. I love that idea, and yeah, it's looking like the project's coming along pretty well. What are some things? I'm trying to think. It's almost a hard question, or almost so generic, but maybe some things you've learned along the way with either the build or just going for it, or whether people are, deciding whether to start a project.
Yeah. I mean, I've always had one of the things I say all the time, and a lot of people say this, but I say get after it. It's just,
Yeah.
I worked with a fellow who became a really good friend, and he loved to use that term. He's actually a professional race car driver, but he'll always say, you just got to get after it. Like, just stop sitting there and get after it. It's amazing what, you know, tunnels we can find ourselves in when we're trying to get motivated from other people, right? But the more you're sitting on your phone looking at what this guy's doing or this girl's doing, and then you start saying, well, they're in California, they can work on this thing whenever they want because the weather's so great, or they're in Nevada and the taxes are lower, or they're in Colorado. Anything built in the snow looks cooler than mine. And it's funny, even if you want something super badly and you've saved up money and you've set aside time, making that leap, I don't know. I think it's a fight that we have developed within ourselves, and it's very self-inflicted. And it's because we're looking at all these other things, thinking that, oh, I'm going to be inspired by this, but it becomes too much. You saturate yourself, and then you don't know which way to go. It's kind of like if it's kind of like what I said earlier on. If there's thousands of ways to build something, there really is. There's definitely some practical things that you should keep in mind and things to avoid and things to include. But if you were to have a builder or a contractor from the West Coast of the United States, East Coast of the United States, someone from Canada, someone from Germany, someone from Sweden, and someone from New Zealand or Australia, and you got them all into a room and you all asked them, how do I start building this cabin? You would be you'd be so overwhelmed because everyone would have a slightly or very different way of telling you how to do this. And it becomes numbing. And I think that same effect can come from trying to get inspired or trying to absorb too much from other people, especially if you're hunting for it, right? If you're just kind of shopping around for cabins and you've never been quite interested in it and you do it for years and you ultimately end up building a cabin, I think you're soaking up that information slightly differently. That's what eventually makes you actually finally want to build that cabin. But if you know you're going to build a cabin or a tiny house and you're hunting so heavily on how exactly you want to do that, well, I don't think you're going to end up building what you actually want to build. It's going to be a robot of all these other things and all these pieces of other people's projects, which is really good. I think we all need motivation and we have to include things that worked for other people. But I think it's really important to just start, just start. I don't know what that looks like for people, if it's just drawing a picture or maybe starting to look at land. And I think when you start to do that, your ideas change. You see a plot of land with a river or a creek or a mountain or a valley, or that's going to change how you want to make this thing. And you're not going to find any other plot of land like the one that you want to build on. And I think a cabin is going to, or a tiny house or whatever it is you're making, is going to absorb whatever part of life or wherever you're going to put that thing. I'm a video editor. I'm a sound guy. I love good films. I love the outdoors, and I want all that to be included in the things that I build. You know,
Yeah,
um,
speaking to that, you said, you know what, for us, we were looking at, I think it was in maybe, yeah, April or May, we were looking at property, and even just that idea, even though we knew we weren't exactly right there, it was probably going to be a few months or maybe even a year, depending on how things were going. That even just that sparked the idea of like, hey, well, we're going to have our property soon, and when we do, we want to have something right away, to already have something to put on it and be able to at least have a foundation, to start building more. And even like you said too, with building this, once we committed and that little foundation and the floor was done, we didn't know what kind of walls we were going to get. We didn't know what kind of choices we were going to make with any of those things. I didn't know for the roof, what I was going to do for that. So, but because we had committed, once you started that, you're just you are committed, and you just are forced to make those choices and continue to just move along and learn things you didn't know you could. And I look at it now, and this is basically 10 by 12, but looking at it, it's like, oh, when we build our property, it's like, oh, I think I could do about 2.5 3 times that and build us a really nice, like, tiny home that's got lofts and enough to live really nice and comfortably, kind of in the same style. So, and I would have never thought I could maybe build a house for us, but I built something smaller, and continue to realize you can do more and more. So, being able to put information out there, then that's what I love what you're doing. You're putting information out there that people can take, and they can say, hey, like, I'm going to try this. Like, I'm a perfect example, and I'm sure there's others out there that have done that as well. And that's, I love that about what you're doing and what you're, it is giving back. It's like by doing something for yourself, you are in filming it, you are giving back to help the next, that next person along the line that, wants to have a better way of living, or wants to, whether it's getting out and, not having to buy a mortgage. Maybe some of people are trying to do stuff debt free. This is a this what you've done is really a way for a lot of people to try to do stuff debt free. And so, I love that you're putting that out there for people.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I mean, living in California, firsthand how expensive,
Yes.
um, this American dream, quotation marks, is for people. It's expensive. It's so expensive. I'm in Virginia, just south of DC, and you know we're in a small town, but you'd think we were in Manhattan with just how things are ran and the prices, and it's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. And as crazy as it is, and as hard as it is for some people, it's forcing people to evolve a little bit in their decision making, in what they decide to save money on or spend money on. It's up to you if you want to spend money on a brand new phone every year or two when your provider offers that deal to you. But you got to know that you are going to be giving up on some possible future endeavors when you spend money on stuff that, ultimately, if I was to compare it to building a cabin for 12 grand, I could count a million and one things in most people's lives. If they were willing to give up, they could save up money and build something like this themselves. But you got to prioritize it,
Yeah.
and whether it is corona, or whether it is high mortgage, or high home values and prices across the nation, these things are tough. No one likes them, but it causes you, it forces priority on parts of your life. And I think that's where a lot of this, you know different kinds of living have really evolved from. There's no I don't think I don't think there's many people that initially want to live in a 10 by 12 or 10 by 20 structure. Not initially, but when you see all the benefits, whether it's financial, less tech distractions, more enjoyment of being in the outdoors and doing things that you want to do because you have less stress and more money and less anxiety to do so. I think that's what this, uh, tinier lifestyle and more cabin oriented living has really evolved from.
Yeah, it really has for people. And I think YouTube is helping a kind of a cultural revolution of that, because more and more channels, and then more, I mean, the the levels that some of these, whether it's school bus, kind of groups of people that are getting together, van life, all these different types, and even homesteading, you know what I mean? Even things like homesteading are coming back as a cool new thing to do. And like,
Yeah.
so I think we're really are seeing kind of the next change of people realizing you can live really free, way cheaper, and kind of just explore life in a little bit of a different way. And
Sometimes I think people, you limit yourself to being like, well, I've never done it before. I don't even know what it is to swing a hammer. Like, what's the difference between a nail and a screw? What's a nail gun? What's an air compressor? Well, you've never done it. You've never even experienced it. And like, the education system is built on not knowing anything, right? That's the whole point. Like, go to university, go to college, and the day you get there, nothing. You know your interest, you want to do it. And I think that's what propels you to learn, to study, to take tests and exams. And I'm the furthest thing from wanting to go to college or university, but that's the best comparison for people, because I get comments and emails and messages all the time. What do I do? How do I do it? How did you? I mean, I just did it. It's the whole get after it mentality. You got to get out there and do it. This cabin, I think roughly, I still have to do like a cost breakdown video because everyone asks for that, but I think I spent between 12 to 14 grand.
okay.
And to a lot of people, that's a lot of money, right? And it's a lot of money to me. Like
Yeah.
the fact that I spent that much money, but now that I look, I'm like, man, that's pretty impressive. Like you'd probably pay twice that to get someone else to do it for you.
Oh yeah.
But
Most
if,
wise.
yeah, but if you were to compare that price point of that cabin to education, and again, I'm not knocking education, but I'm just comparing it to, this is how I see it, right? Most educations in the United States have to be well over 10 grand a year, right?
Yeah, easily.
Easily, and depending on what you're learning, it's easy 4 years, dorms, cafeteria food, you're eating out, all these things come into play. And at the end of each year, you know, what did you learn? How much did you learn? And that is, again, like that's the perfect comparison to this cabin. I
Oh
do it
yeah.
all the time.
I I I completely agree. I can't even begin to say when I look at this that this is the biggest thing that I've ever done. It's like I did something for myself in life. Like I look at this as something like that. Like just like you said, that money spent was knowledge. And if I would have uh bought one or didn't do it myself, that I would have paid that, like you said, ours basically roughly came out to 10, and I would have paid that in a second for the knowledge that I gained in building it. And it takes just starting, like you're saying, it just takes starting that first nail.
Yeah. And that's another thing that with YouTube being, my primary learning source for all things my cabin build. It's incredible. Like once you want to do it, once you want to learn, once you need to learn how to put in a window properly, or once you need to learn how to set your foundations properly, you'll find a way to learn. You'll find a way, and you're going to, again, be overwhelmed with all the information of how many different ways there are to do these things. But you'll find a way, and you'll learn because you evolve and you step up to the occasion.
Yeah, one of the funny things I wanted to bring up with your windows. So this window that's behind me, this big one, we had gotten our windows for this at Habitat. We bought all the windows at Habitat for Humanity,
Yeah,
used for a great deal. We basically had we were stuck with that. And this window, as I was putting this window, that I broke this window or cracked it all the way across. And for what we were doing, it was basically stuck with this, with the shape at least, or it would have taken a lot to redo it. I was so lucky that they had one more somehow that was exactly the same as this. It ended up costing me, I think, 150 extra bucks. So it was terrible, a loss. But it made me think of, your windows. You had almost a similar type of thing that I imagine was probably one of the biggest headaches for the whole build.
yeah. So I didn't do a whole lot of research in terms of, like, when you see a door or you see a window, if you can see through it, you're like, oh, nice, the window works. Well, you learn though, with double pane, and now there's triple pane insulated glass and all this stuff. Just because you can see through it on a whatever regular day doesn't mean that the seal hasn't gone dead. And basically, I collected these probably 30-year-old windows from a fellow who was redoing his old house. He put them on Craigslist for free. I ran up there with a trailer and took everything I could get. Ultimately, the only thing that ended up going into the cabin was the door. But first, I framed up all these, the window wall. I framed up, every portion of my cabin that was going to have windows. I framed them for these specific windows that I got for free. And basically, I installed, I think, four of them, ultimately finding out that the seals were bad on all of them. And so, you know, new chapter of knowledge, learning that you want to check when you get used windows, and knowing that windows actually have a lifespan. They don't, just because they're glass and just because they're not broken doesn't mean that they're going to live forever, unless it's a single pane sheet of glass, I think. But those seals just eventually go bad. And so reframed all the windows. My buddy Max, who actually installs glass professionally, had just taken all this commercial glass out of a 1 year old building that the new tenants wanted to redo all the windows. So he came and dropped off like 40 windows, and then after receiving those windows, began reframing and remeasuring for this new glass that I got. So a couple of good things came from it. Obviously, I got new windows. good windows. They're 1 inch thick, quarter-inch glass, half-inch gap in between. And so they're very well insulated. The other ones that I would have had would have been garbage. It would be freezing out there right now, but it's actually a very cozy cabin because I've got nice windows. And the window wall, the huge 12-foot tall window wall, I really didn't frame it that well the first time I did it. The second time when I had to redo it, I put the proper structure and support and like jacks and sills and kingpin studs and all that kind of, technical framing terms. I was able to do it, a lot better because I had read a lot of comments of how poor certain framing things that I had done in the past. And so I was like, oh, I might as well try and fix that, everything with a grain of salt. Listen to
Yeah.
some of those those comments out there that might seem hateful, but they're just trying to help. They just don't know how to talk to you.
Yeah, that's gotta be an interesting thing about having the YouTube channel is that you do get that feedback, and you never know. There are people, all the time, like, "Hey, I'm an expert at this or an expert," and hey, if to not take a good tip when it comes would be, foolish.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it always stings a little bit, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
um, and that's another thing that you could kind of compare to school. Like,
yeah,
how often is it that your professor, your teacher makes you feel kind of dumb, right? I mean, they are the smartest person in the room after all. And when you're building something by yourself, you don't have someone standing there like, come on, Graham. Not like that. Come on, not like that. Instead, you have the post build stuff, the post I've already done it stuff, and someone says, I wouldn't have done it that way, or you shouldn't have done it
yeah,
this way. I would suggest, you know, looking at framing for dummies next time you consider making that decision, or, and that's just unfortunately part of the game of learning. But yeah, it can sting a bit, but it's humbling. And um, yeah, I think it's healthy for everybody to be humbled once in a while.
so yeah, I'm super super thankful for what you're doing and what you're giving out to other people. You're uh shining light to the world as far as I'm considered. Because anybody that's out there teaching people, helping people do things that are creative and fun and can help them is good in my book. So I'm really appreciative of that. Do you have any future projects, any last things that you want to say, or anything coming up?
Not really. I mean, I'm just trying to invest some time into the YouTube channel because it's been a lot of fun. I've met a lot of people like you. Like, I met another fellow named Graeme who runs this magazine in New York, and he's asking questions. I've connected with this electrician. I call him the the godfather of electric. And we'll Zoom call if I have a question, and he's become a friend. But again, during all things Corona or COVID, online friendships are not to be, taken lightly. I think I take
Yeah,
my online connections quite seriously because it's fun. It gives me a sense of purpose. I'm held to a bit of a standard of, encouraging people, and it's fun. It's given me the ability to see gifts that maybe I didn't realize I had. I didn't know that people would be encouraged by this. I didn't know that, even though I don't know everything about building a cabin, that so many people would care about my opinion. And again, it's humbling, right? I'm a nobody in a lot of ways, but the fact that there's a significant amount of people now that think I'm a somebody, it makes me feel special. But it keeps me accountable to keep producing content that they feel encouraged by, that they're entertained by. And so yeah, it's been a whole lot of fun. I'm dreaming up all kinds of ideas. I want to build another cabin right after I build the mobile trailer. So I'm just trying to find out ways and land to do it on. But yeah, no, it's been a whole lot of fun. And yeah, I appreciate you having me on your podcast,
dude,
man.
I really appreciate you coming, and I love you. So for your channel, Woodness Goodness, one of the coolest podcast or coolest channels out there. I mean, you have just so fun. You're always so light, always just having a good time, and I'm excited to see all the things that you continue to do in the future. And I'd love to have you on again sometime, man.
Anytime, man. Appreciate it. I'll be listening in. I'm gonna be one of your biggest fans now.
Sounds good, dude. Yeah, we've had some really cool guests, some really cool people on, so I'm really excited to start putting these out, man. So
Cool.
Thank you again for being on. I'll talk to you soon. You have a good day.
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of the Peach Life Podcast. You can find Graeme on YouTube at Woodness Goodness, and his links are posted below. Subscribe to our channel if you want to hear more stories like this. Next week, we will be joined by Justin from Gilligan Phantom Presents Mobile Dwelling.